Hello Sewmates, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I will show you how to make this stunning Ankara fringe gown from the cutting process to the sewing. This is a beginners friendly tutorial where I will guide you through every step to create yours. So if you want to learn how to make yours, do keep on watching and don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel. It's one way to support your favorite creators for free. So let's get started. Alright, let's get into it. First, let me show you the materials I'll be using for this gown. I have 2 yards of Ankara fabric, 2 yards of white crepe, and 3 packets of fringe for the detailing. I'll list everything in the description box. Now let's move on to the cutting process. I have my pattern paper that I'll be using to draft my princess dart for the half length. I'm going ahead to mark my shoulder, my bust point, my under bust, and my half length on my pattern paper, as you can see. And then on the shoulder line, I divided my shoulder into 2 equal halves. After doing that, I came down by 1 inch on that same point. The next thing I did was to mark the neck wideness to be 3.5 inches and the neck depth of 4 inches. So I'll be connecting the points for my shoulder slant and for my neck curve using my straight ruler and my French curve. So having done that, I came down from my shoulder slant by 8 inches, which is serving as my arm side length. Then I also took my shoulder divided by 2 on that same point. Then after doing that, I connected to my shoulder slant and also draw an horizontal line for my arm side length. So I divided my arm side length into 2 equal halves. Then on that midpoint, I came in by 0.5 inch. I used my straight ruler to slant that to my shoulder slant, just as you can see. Then on my arm side length, I measured my round bust measurement divided by 4. Then I used my curved ruler to connect from that midpoint to the bust measurements. So I just went ahead to make all the lines visible so you can see them clearly. So next, I divided my bust span measurement into 2, which gave me 3.75. The bust span measurement is also known as the nipple to nipple. So I marked that 3.75 from my bust point down to my half length. Then after doing that, I used my straight ruler to connect the points to form a straight line. So now we're going to be marking the darts for the princess dart bustier. On the half length, I came out by 0.5 inch on the center front. Then from that point, I placed my tape on 1.5 inch to mark on the other side. For the underbust, I followed the same process. I marked 0.5 inch at the center front. Then I measured 2 inches outward from that point to mark the dart width. So this is going to make the total dart intake at the underbust to be 2 inches. Then after that, I connected the dart points to form a straight line. So next, I use my curved ruler to connect from each dart leg to my bust point line like so. So I took note of the midpoint of the armhole. Then after doing that, I came down by 1 inch from that midpoint. Then the next thing I did was to place my curved ruler from the mid armhole to my bust point line, and I connected like this. So then I'll also connect from that second point on my armhole to my bust point line like this. Then I extended the line a bit. So I'm going to measure 1 inch for the extended line and connect to my bust measurement. So instead of the old armhole, I'll be cutting out from the new extended armhole. So having drafted the darts for the princess bustier, I went ahead to take my body measurement. I've gone ahead to mark my bust divided by 4. Then on my half length, I measured my waist divided by 4. Then I took out the biggest dart, which is the under bust dart of 2 inches. Then having done that, I connected to my bust measurement like so. So next, I came down by 2 inches from my bust point line and I extended that point to my bust span line, which is going to be serving as my bust dart. So I'm just indicating that that bust dart is going to be closed. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to add my sewing allowance of 1.5 inch. Then I'll go ahead to cut out my pattern. So guys, after cutting out the princess dart bustier, I went ahead to close my bust dart. So after closing my bust dart, I noticed that the body measurement is affected on the side. So I cut out a little piece of paper to place underneath it to extend my measurements and to make it accurate. So after sealing the bust dart closed, Next thing I did was to curve my princess bustier very well. So I used my curve driller to just curve out that sharp point. Then I will cut it out. So yes, this is how to cut a princess dart bustier. Now with this pattern, you don't need to do a lot of contouring for your princess dart bustier to take shape and to stand on its own. So now let's move on to the back pattern. For the back pattern, I basically did everything I did when I started drafting my front pattern, but the only difference is that my back half length is shorter than my front half length. The back half length is 16 inches because of the bust dart allowance. Then I measured my shoulder, my arm side length, and the neck wideness of 3.5 inches. Then the neck depth is 1.5 inches. Then I also went ahead to add my zipper allowance of 1.5 inches. So after taking my bust measurement on my half length, I took my round waist measurement divided by 4. Then I added 1 inch for dart allowance. Then I connected my bust measurements to the measurement on my half length. So after doing that, to mark the darts, you're going to measure what you have on your actual waist and divide it by 2. So what I have there, I also measured on my arm side length. Then I connected to form a straight line. So having done that, I measured 0.5 inch on both sides of the line, which is the 1 inch that I replaced already. So after doing that, I connected to form my darts like so. And so next, I'm going to remove zipper board from my zipper allowance. So I divided what I have on my zipper allowance into 2. Then I went ahead to just slant it upwards, just like you see me doing. So that part is going to be cut out. And because of the fact that it's going to be cut out, I need to replace it on the side part. So I measured exactly what I removed and I placed it on the side part and connected to my bust measurements. Then after doing that, I added my 1.5 inch for my sewing allowance. So then I brought back the front pattern, the side part of the front pattern, to be able to match it up with the back. So I came down by half an inch and I connected to my armhole just as you see here. So before cutting out the back pattern, I will come down by 0.5 inch from my shoulder slant, and I'm just going to slant that to my neck wideness. So the reason I do that is because of the fact that after joining the princess dart bustier, the back armhole tends to be wider than the front. So this is just to make it equal. That's the reason why I came down by half an inch on the shoulder slant. So having done that now, I went ahead to cut my pattern. So I just went ahead to mark my zipper allowance again of 1.5 inch so you can see how it's going to look like. So now we're done drafting the upper bodice of the gown. So I'll keep this aside and let's cut out the skirt pattern. So right here I have this pattern folded into 2 and this is going to be for the skirt part. So first I came down by 8.5 inches for my hip length. So I'll just mark that point all through on the pattern and I'll connect to form a straight line. I'll be using this same pattern to cut for the back. All I need to do is just add my zipper allowance. So I labeled my lines, my waistline, my hip line and my full length. So to get the full length of the skirt part, I took out my half length of 18 inches to measure the full length of my gown. So I wanted it to be 58 inches, but I have 54 inches right here. So I'm going to add extra 4 inches on my main fabric when I place the pattern on it. So having done that, I went ahead to take my round waist measurement divided by 4 and I marked it on my waistline. And then I added 1 inch for seam allowance and 1 inch for dart allowance, which I later removed at the end of the day because there was no need for adding darts. Then on the hip line, I took my round hip measurement divided by 4 and 1 inch for sewing allowance. So I used my curve driller to connect from my sewing allowance on the waist to the hip, and I also connected to the dart points. So like I said, I later removed the dart allowance because there was really no need to fix that. So next thing I did was to measure what I have on my round hip measurement, my exact hip measurement, and I went ahead to place it on the down part of my pattern. And then I added 0.5 inch for the sewing allowance instead of the usual 1 inch. This is because the crepe fabric I'm working with is stretchy. So I wanted the skirt part to have a pencil shape. So after doing that, I connected from my hip measurement to that point. Then I just placed my ruler to just slant it to the full length. So let's just take that point as the knee length. So I have 10.75 on that knee length, and then on the full length I have 10.5 inches. So after doing that, now I will cut out my pattern. So guys, after cutting out the pattern, I open it up like this, and then I'm going to extend the hip length to the other side. So guys, this is the point I folded the pattern back again, and then I removed the dart allowance. Like I said, there was really no need to fix a dart on the skirt part. So guys, before going ahead to get that cutout part, I first of all marked my sewing allowance of 1 inch from the waist to the hip line. So on the left side of my pattern, I came up by 1 inch from the hip length. So I marked that measurement on the exact body measurement and not the sewing allowance. Then on the right side, I came down by 1.5 inch. So after marking the both points, you can see the way I'm connecting it. So the next thing I did was to rule a straight line on the center front, because I'll be using the same pattern to cut out the back. So before I cut it out, I just went ahead to label left and right the way I want it to be. So I will cut out the line and place on my fabric. So after cutting out the line, I just labeled that the top part to be for the Ankara fabric and the bottom will be for the crepe fabric. And all I need to do is just to add my sewing allowance on the top and the bottom, because I already added sewing allowance on the side. Then also to extend the length of the bottom part. So guys, I've gone ahead to cut out the Ankara part. I cut my back pattern and I added half-inch sewing allowance on all the sides except for the side part and the zipper allowance. Then also for the front, I added half-inch seam allowance on the neck, the shoulder, the half length except for the side part. Then for this skirt part, I added half-inch seam allowance on all the sides. So for the skirt part, I added an extra half inch so that it will match up with the allowance I used on the half length. You know, I used 1.5 inch on the half length and I had 1 inch on the side part. So that's the reason for adding extra half an inch. Then I also cut the same thing on my lining. So having done that, I went ahead to cut on that middle line. So this part is the front part of the pattern. So I'm going to turn it over to the other side to cut the back. So I labeled the other side the back pattern. And then I put in arrows to indicate the parts that will have the zipper allowance. So you can see this is the way I'm going to place it on my fabric. I'm going to place it turned like this and cut. So guys, on my Ankara fabric, I got the front part of the fabric and I placed my pattern just like you see. And I'm going to use my pins to secure it. Then having done that, I added my zipper allowance of 1.5 inch on the center front and half-inch seam allowance on the down part, on the side and also on the waistline. So I also placed the other one the same way. I measured my zipper allowance and used my pin to secure the pattern, and I also added my half-inch seam allowance all around it. So having done that, I'll go ahead to cut on the marked line. So guys, after I cut out the pattern, this is what I have it looking like. So I also cut on my lining the same way. Now let's move on to the down part of the gown. So for this down part, I'm making use of a crepe fabric, and the part that stretches more on the fabric is going to be placed horizontally for the skirt pattern. So guys, I'm going to place it on the ground because my table is not wide enough. So I went ahead to pin the pattern on my fabric. The fabric is rumpled, but after cutting, I'm going to iron it to make it relaxed. So I added 4 inches, which is going to complete my gown length. And then I'm just going to cut the exact shape of the pattern because I already added sewing allowance before. Then on the top, I added half inch for sewing allowance. So after cutting, this is what I have it looking like. I took out my pattern and I will use the same pattern to cut for the back. So before taking out my pattern, I just marked on the back of the fabric to take notes of the back. Then after taking out my pattern, I'll go ahead to iron this part to make it smooth. So next, I'll go ahead to cut on the middle line to separate the pattern into two. So next, having done that, I just took note of the front and the back pattern. So I labeled the back pattern B, and then I drew arrows that is going to indicate where my zipper allowance is going to be. So I'm going to place my pattern on my fabric and add my zipper allowance of 1 inch, then half inch seam allowance on the top to join to the top part. And then I'll also add the 4 inches to complete the length of the gown. So right now I've gone ahead to cut the pattern on my fabric just like I explained. So next we're going to be padding the princess dart bustier. So first of all, I separated my pattern for my fabric. So I'll go ahead to mark the shape of the padding. So first of all, I came up by 2 inches for my chest line on the center front, as you can see. Then I also ruled a straight line on my underbust. Then on the side part, you're going to measure what you have on your bust span to the side part and add 1 inch. Then having done that, I connected like this to my underbust. Then I also came up by 2 inches from the armhole. So just watch closely and see the way I drafted the pattern. So I'm just going to cut on the line and then place on my chest wadding, which is also known as padded, to cut. So guys, I've gone ahead to cut my padded and I added half inch towards the seam line to match up with the main fabric. So I'm going to open it up and iron the padded. But before doing that, I want to first of all cut my neck styling. So I place the lining together with the main fabric and this is the neck styling I want. So I'm using the skirt part as a guide to know exactly where to place the angled shape, just as you can see from the inspiration. So on the left side, I measured 7 inches for my shoulder. Then having done that, I use my straight ruler to just connect to the neck wideness. And then on the other side, I use the curved part of my ruler to just connect from the neckline to the 7-inch point. And then I'm going to remove 0.5 inch from the neck wideness so that it's not going to be too small. So having done that, I will be cutting out the shape and I'll also be removing 0.5 inch for the back neck wideness as well. So then I brought the back pattern and I aligned it with the front shoulder. Then the excess that I have towards the neck wideness, I will be cutting it out. So the lining of the back and the main fabric are already together. So I'm just going to cut the both of them together. So after getting the neckline shape, I will go ahead to iron the bust pad to the princess dart. Before adding the bust pad, I've already ironed interfacing on the whole of the pattern for the front. And then after doing that, I place my bust pad on top of it and I'm going to iron the same way. So guys, this is where we're going to end for the drafting pattern. The next video will be for the sewing process and I will take you through how to join all the pattern pieces and also how to add your fringe detailing. So if you find this particular video helpful, do well to like, share and consider subscribing to the channel if you're yet to subscribe. See you in the next one and thank you so much for watching.